the real understanding of Kundalini, if we speak about it, it's the affair that takes place at the level of consciousness only. And what temporarily experienced here as this individual or that individual, this particular story, this particular unfoldment, is something else. The bigger picture always that it's unfoldment within consciousness. And this unfoldment within consciousness is not subject to this life alone, although different perspectives are offered. Variety of teachings and assessments of that given. Some emphasize that only in this life you can make great strides because we don't know what's in the next. But if we adopt less strict perspective, let's say, then in any case it is still a grand movement within consciousness. So Kundalini is not really something that is individualized consciousness only here, and then therefore it is for the sake of individual who experiencing it and then also relates to the process itself as Kundalini process with constant reference to that individual. This is the catch-22. This is a great paradox and also the great, I would say, a great quicksilver-like nature of it all. Because that kingdom of heaven is within. And what stands between the kingdom of heaven within and why it is not experienced is because something somehow appears as if usurping that access to that kingdom. And paradoxically, that this what somehow appears apparently usurps that, right? In itself is part and parcel of that, how heaven within is rediscovered, that paradise is being returned. So that grand perspective, that bigger picture, that it only happens to consciousness and on the level of consciousness, which makes it very disconcerting in a way for having a human being, because we try to map the process onto the human being. We're superimposing the process of Kundalini unfoldment on our life and onto the human being, whereas it's the other way around, if anything. It is the human being who is here being mapped into that grand unfoldment of Kundalini as consciousness. So, therefore, it is truly a grand journey of consciousness, either way. And of course, there are specifics and particularities as the course had to address, how it can go and ways it can go, and those that are desirable and those that are non-desirable and those that are in between as less desirable. We've got to speak about this. So the important thing is to always, periodically at least, have this reminder of how things are, so as not to end up with that inevitable superimposition to how it pans out in my life, or how is it in relation to my life, my body, my story, my physiology, even maybe my subtle anatomy, because that's also what very, very common. And this is where that curiosity that maybe not kills the cat, but certainly puts cat into trouble many times, that wants to know, where am I in this journey? So the immediate answer, of course, from the Advaita point of view would be to say that you never left to return anywhere. This is the reminder. You never left to come back. So in other words, this and that, all this is apparently happening for the sake of consciousness itself. So that grand perspective here, again, it happens here in a sense as the really high quality, let's say HBO, series that are being created, if you remove the thrill of the unfoldment, right, and cut out all the cliffhangers, then that whole thrill of the experience is not there. You see? In the same way, that's how the individuality fits into this. Because this is where literally that lila, that chit vilas is being experienced fully and savored fully in complete and unimaginable fullness from, and like every area, every level of heavenly and earthly strata we can speak of, it's full everywhere, full and complete. There are so many different levels of that existence to the existence. And human being takes it somewhere from the inertness of the granite, rock, stone, which is still consciousness. But consciousness is alive only to that unit of aliveness that we speak of as inert, inanimate. And to the supreme expression of awareness as perfection itself, all the way to siddhahood. Human being is placed somewhere in between there, somewhere from that inertness of the rock, where only that unit of consciousness is. So that rockness of that rock is checked by its inertness to utmost aliveness in incomprehensible state of perfection, represented by that Sanskrit term, perfect one, siddha. Human being is somewhere inserted, because that aliveness on the increase from the rock, it's on the increase, right? From the mineral life as that expression of inertness, it goes into more aliveness, each phase, plant, animal, till it reaches that level of human being, and then from human being, it further room to grow in different strata of that expression of consciousness, where these units of aliveness are greater, units of consciousness. All this, of course, is also within that subtle anatomy. So Kundalini's progression, Kundalini's process, Kundalini here is spoken only in terms of that understanding. This is maybe also, there is always a slight degree of blasphemy, a slight degree of something to really go and do this, because if we do not worship this, if we do not have a deep, profound level of awe to that, what this is, the mother represents, then we always run the danger, not you, but we, all of us, run the danger of trivializing this, ending up with some kind of scheme, some kind of structure. Whereas what we speak about here is consciousness itself here, experiencing its own marvel. And where we are at this is the greatest of all the questions, because it's the test of where we are still bound. Because as awareness, you are nowhere in this process. All these processes happens within you. That's the only real view. And yet you are still forever the child of that great mother. It is this balance, it is this perplexing, unfathomable mystery of holding that paradox together at the very same time in a certain required balance. You are nothing other than that awareness within which all this takes place. Whilst at the same time as that individual stories, or as far as that individual story is concerned, is that child of consciousness. Is that what here, for the sake of its own entertainment, so that it can experience this marvel? So it's at any extreme end of its opposites, utterly, entirely insignificant, and yet it's all there is, that the great mystery is here and nowhere else. If it could have been somewhere else, then it would have happened somewhere else, but it is in a human being. There are greater beings in whom units of consciousness are much greater. Kinnaras, Danavas, Gandharvas, all these devas, shiny ones, and devis. But it is within the human being that this is the possibility where that can take place, as far as the tradition goes. So, this is also maybe now borrowing the analogies in some other traditions. This is a true nature of consciousness is unfathomable. And yet, we are embedded with the capacity to think, mind. So therefore we can contemplate the somic qualities of the mind. We can contemplate. And this contemplation is not spiritual practice per se. It's contemplating the great mystery. Therefore this is spoken of as contemplative traditions. It doesn't replace the spiritual path of unfoldment, but it's this capacity to contemplate that incomprehensible mystery. Here, unfathomable mystery. Through everything. Through every act, through everything. Because that's what this is. You see? So therefore this, where am I on this journey, right, is again, can be contemplated on in that very great paradox. You see? And this is why a little use on, you are here, you are in this station of your ascent, in this station. And so what does it mean, really? It's already thwarting something about the truth of that. Narrowing it, boxing it, kind of confining it to something which is beyond this. And yet, again, paradoxically enough, that also how the process maps itself out. Because of these stations of the cross, because of these stations that consciousness undergoes in its own unfoldment for its own sake. So in any, as it now could be referred to, intermediate phases, where subject-object in these dynamics, it will play itself out, and the only measure of how much consciousness you have, because that's also what Kundalini is the measure of how alive you are. You see? How alive. Don't confuse it with liveness of the raw vitality, as some people do. And modern spirituality also suffers from these pangs of insecurity, where it tries to reconcile something, and this, trying to take Tantra into something everyday, kind of like, it's a great plagiarism of sacred knowledge anyway, to turn it into everyday's entertainment, kind of like, No. Tantrika, true definition of Tantrika, a true meaning of Tantrika, is already dead. This is why I welcomed Amrita putting these Mexican skulls here for my present, because it carries that meaning immediately, pictorially, iconographically. That deadness here is the passport, visa, a true pass, not the pass I didn't have when I wanted to enter the restaurant the other night, and I didn't have the required vaccination. It's the true passcode of partaking in this life fully. You see? So there is a threshold as well we could speak of. There is a threshold which can be mapped by more or less dramatic events of how you pass through that portal, passing through that portal where you begin to live life in greater capacity simply because the great offering took place. That what was never born is getting acknowledged at the expense of that what is false dies naturally. And out of that pile of ashes that all we held dearly to our life, to as the most precious possession, is nothing other than what it is. The phoenix arises of your own being. This is the Kundalini process.